Before Sparta, there was only wilderness and the cold rush of a great mountain river. The Eurotas carved its valley through the Peloponnese under an unforgiving ancient sun. No city yet, no warriors, just the land, the wind, and deep silence before history began. This is Sparta, 2,500 years compressed into 15 short minutes. Stay with us. The full truth is far stranger than any myth you already know about it. Around 900 BC, the Dorian people settled the fertile Eurotas valley of southern Greece. They were not yet the iron warriors feared, just farmers and herders on a quiet plain. 4 small villages slowly merged into one community on the wide Laconian plain below. The world would come to know this place by a name that still silences every single room: Sparta. A single word carrying the weight of bronze shields and of absolute human will. The land was fertile, but ringed by hostile neighbors and resentful and conquered peoples. Survival demanded something extraordinary, a society organized around one sole purpose. Sparta did not build great walls to guard itself from enemies pressing at its outer gates. It built men. The Spartan citizens themselves became the wall, fierce and fully unbroken. No civilization in history chose this path with such total and terrifying consistency, ever. By 800 BC, a rigid social order emerged unlike anything in the ancient world of all Greece. Spartiates were full warrior citizens who owned land and owed their entire lives to the state. Below them, the perioikoi, free craftsmen and traders who supplied the city's daily needs. At the very bottom sat the helots, enslaved farmers who outnumbered Spartans 10 to 1. This brutal structure defined Sparta's power and planted the seeds of its eventual ruin. The helot population was vast and restless, a volcano always smoldering under Spartan feet. To maintain control, Sparta built a system of state terror that shocked even ancient writers. Every year, the Spartan state declared war on the helots, making their killing fully legal. Young warriors hunted helots in darkness as a rite of passage, the brutal night cryptia. Fear, not loyalty, held Sparta together, and fear shaped every institution the city built. Around 650 BC, the lawgiver Lycurgus, real or mythical, transformed all of Spartan life. His laws touched every corner of existence: property, marriage, and raising every single child. No Spartan could own gold or silver. Wealth was measured in land, discipline, and duty alone. Men dined together in common halls, sharing coarse black broth. Even the kings ate alike here. Lycurgus grasped one timeless truth: luxury corrupts the soul, and soft men lose all empires. The agog, Sparta's legendary training system, began for every boy at the age of 7. Boys were removed from families and placed in barracks under older warriors' strict watch. They slept on reed mats, cut from the Eurotas riverbank, regardless of cold or of scorching heat. They wore one thin garment through all seasons: summer's blazing heat and bitter winter cold. Those who endured became the most disciplined and lethal soldiers the ancient world had seen. At age 12, the training grew even harder. Food was deliberately rationed to near starvation. Boys were encouraged to steal to survive, but beaten severely if they were ever caught doing it. The lesson was not about theft. It was about cunning, speed, and the art of never being detected. At 18, the young Spartan entered the ranks, but full citizenship came only at age 30. 23 years of total state formation before a man was granted the right to call himself free. Sparta also built something rarer: a culture of female strength and fierce moral authority indeed. Spartan women exercised publicly, competed in athletics, and managed all estates while men drilled. They were educated and outspoken, expected to raise strong sons, and to grieve fallen sons proudly. A mother handing her son his shield said only, "Return with it, or be carried home upon it, my son." No other Greek city gave its women such freedom, such voice, or such terrifying moral authority. Spartan girls trained in running, wrestling, and javelin throwing under the open Mediterranean sky. This was not recreation. Strong mothers produced stronger sons, and stronger sons defended Sparta. The body of a Spartan woman was a military asset, as vital as any man in bronze armor. Foreign visitors were scandalized watching Spartan women exercise in public without shame. Sparta did not care. It never cared what any foreigner thought of what happened within. By 500 BC, Sparta led the Peloponnesian League, the dominant military alliance in all of Greece. Its hoplites in bronze phalanx were widely considered the finest soldiers anywhere on earth. Then Persia arrived, an empire so vast its army was said to darken the sky above all of Greece. In 480 BC, Leonidas led 300 Spartans north with a small coalition of Greek allies. Their destination was a narrow pass named Thermopylae, and their mission was to die well. The Persian force under Xerxes was perhaps the largest army the entire ancient world had ever seen. For 3 days and 3 brutal nights, the Spartans held the narrow pass against all crushing odds. Leonidas knew from the first morning they would not survive, and survival was never once the point. The message was clear. No Persian gold could ever purchase or rent a single Spartan warrior's soul. They fell to the last man. But Greece held, and the legend of the 300 was born forever. A survivor named Aristodemus had left the pass with an eye infection and survived it all. Back in Sparta, he was shunned, called the Trembler, stripped of all honor for the rest of his days. He died fighting bravely at Plataea the following year, but Sparta refused to grant him any glory. In Sparta, surviving when brothers died was not bravery. It was a disgrace without forgiveness. That story alone tells you everything about what Sparta valued most above all human life. After Persia, Athens rose as the brilliant, democratic commercial heart of the entire Greek world. Sparta watched with growing unease as Athenian power spread outward across the whole Aegean basin. Two opposing visions of civilization faced each other across a widening gulf of pride and suspicion. One city built on open debate, the other built on iron sacrifice and total obedience to the state. In 431 BC, the collision arrived. The Peloponnesian War, 27 years of brutal, grinding ruin. Sparta could not storm Athens. Its long walls ran all the way down to the open harbor and sea. So Sparta did the unthinkable. It built a fleet and accepted Persian gold to help finance the war. Persia, the enemy Sparta bled to stop at Thermopylae, now became its banker and close ally. In 404 BC, Athens finally surrendered. Sparta stood alone as supreme power across all of Greece. The city that never needed walls now ruled a world it was never built or designed to govern. Sparta installed puppet oligarchies across conquered cities, including Athens' 30 tyrants. The tyrants ruled with such savagery that even Sparta's own allies began to question the new order. Within a year, the Athenians rose up, overthrew the tyrants, and restored their democracy. Sparta had won the war, but immediately began to lose the peace, city by city, ally by ally. It was the oldest story in history, a power built for war with no idea how to sustain peace. Spartan hegemony proved brutal, incompetent, and deeply despised across the entire Greek peninsula. Spartan governors ruled subject cities with an iron fist and a total absence of political skill. Former allies became subjects, then enemies, and those enemies quickly began to find each other. In 371 BC at Leuctra, the Theban general Epaminondas shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility. He killed 400 Spartiates in one afternoon, a loss Sparta could simply never replace. Epaminondas had invented a new tactic, the oblique attack, massing overwhelming force on one flank. The Spartan phalanx, built for frontal collision, had no answer at all for this brutal asymmetry. In a single afternoon, 23 years of Spartan dominance over Greece collapsed into dust. Sparta's fatal flaw had been quietly building for a full century before Leuctra exposed it. Strict laws and war losses had hollowed out the Spartiate warrior class across many long decades. At Leuctra, Sparta lost its finest men in one afternoon. No trained replacements remained. The invincible phalanx held Greece in awe for 2 centuries. Then it fractured and never reformed. Sparta retreated to the Eurotas valley, wounded and diminished, and the age of dominance ended. Epaminondas then invaded Laconia, the first enemy army to do so in 3 unbroken centuries. He freed the helots of Messenia and founded the city of Messene to contain Spartan ambitions. For a century more, Sparta survived, proud, embittered, reduced, but still feared by all rivals. Then the shadow came. Philip II of Macedon swept through Greece like an unstoppable new storm. Sparta alone refused to kneel, even as every other Greek city-state bent and yielded and fell. Philip sent his ultimatum: "Submit, or I will raze your city and enslave everyone inside its walls." Sparta answered with one word: if. Philip chose wisely to march around them and continue on. Alexander conquered the known world and deliberately excluded Sparta from every honor and glory. When he sent captured Persian armor to Athens, the inscription on the trophy was cold and precise. From Alexander and the Greeks, except the Lacedaemonians, a humiliation carved into bronze. Sparta could only fume. The world had grown too large for a city of 3,000 tired warriors. The age of city-states was dying, and Sparta, built perfectly for that age, was becoming a relic. In 222 BC, King Cleomenes III tried to revive the Agoge and redistribute all of Sparta's old land. He canceled debts, freed helots, and rebuilt the army on its ancient and fearsome iron foundations. For one brief moment, Sparta blazed again, defeating Macedonian allies across the Peloponnese. Antigonus III crushed Cleomenes at Silesia, ending the last true attempt at any Spartan revival. Sparta was absorbed into the Macedonian sphere, its independence extinguished and revolution buried. Rome arrived in Greece in the 2nd century BC, and Sparta navigated it with cold-eyed pragmatism. It kept its ancient customs, a privilege Rome granted selectively to cities that cooperated. The Agoge, once the brutal warrior forge, became a scheduled performance for Roman tourist crowds. Roman aristocrats paid to watch young men flogged at the altar of Artemis Orthia for entertainment. Sacred suffering had become ticketed spectacle. Sparta's greatest tradition sold as a performance. Under Roman rule, Sparta thrived as a cultural curiosity and a symbol of admired ancient virtue. Emperors visited personally. Hadrian invested in the city's restoration and its public buildings, but the warriors were gone. The helots freed. The Agoge was theater, the phalanx only a memory. Sparta endured, not as a power, but as a brand, a legend too compelling to ever fully extinguish. Rome gave Sparta peace, and that peace quietly finished what the disaster at Leuctra had begun. The fall of the Western Roman Empire, after 476 AD, brought chaos across the entire Mediterranean. Sparta, still called Lacedaemon, had shrunk to a modest Byzantine town beside the Eurotas River. Alaric the Visigoth sacked it in 396 AD, burning what centuries of Spartan pride had preserved. The dining messes were gone. The Agoge was gone. The Spartiates had dissolved into Roman life. What remained was a name on old maps, a river still flowing, and the most feared name in history. In the 13th century, Crusader Villardouin built a great fortress on a commanding rocky hill near. He named it Maestras, a brilliant Byzantine center of art, theology, and vibrant manuscript culture. Ancient Sparta lay below, abandoned, Its cut stones robbed for newer buildings across the region. Maestras fell to the Ottomans in 1460, and the Laconian region faded into centuries of deep silence. The Eurotas still ran cold through the valley. The mountains still rose. But Sparta was only legend. Modern Sparta was refounded in 1834 by royal decree of King Otto of newly independent Greece. Today, it is a modest city of 16,000 people in the wide Laconian valley of the Peloponnese. Archaeologists still uncover fragments, a bronze figure, a votive stone, a shard of ancient helmet. The ancient Acropolis is an overgrown hill, the theater buried, the temple's only stone ruins. No place on earth carries a heavier, more enduring weight of myth, memory, and human imagination. Sparta never built the Parthenon. It produced no philosophy, no great tragedy the world still reads. It left no soaring temple, no sculpture, no library of texts for future civilizations to inherit. What it left was more durable than marble, a template of will, sacrifice, and iron conviction. 25 centuries on, the word Spartan still carries immediate meaning in every living language. Sparta built its monument out of human beings. Subscribe. The next city is waiting for you.